Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Nirvikar Singh, who first and foremost had the absolute pleasure and good sense of manning Professor in the degree record, and of course had the good sense to follow her in the talk. He's a professor of economics at UC Santa Cruz and a dear friend. He has written extensively on Sikh issues, all the way from Punjab economy to the origins of Sikhism, martyrdom in Sikhism, and the 20th century social reform in Sikhism. He's also the chair of the Sikh and Punjabi studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz. In addition to his Sikh work, he does research on technology and development, entrepreneurship, e-commerce, business strategy, and every good thing that a good economics professor would want to do. He is currently and has been director of Santa Cruz Institute of International Economics, and he is one of the few people who's been chosen by the Chancellor of UC Santa Cruz to lay out the vision of where the UC system is to go in the near future. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Nirvikar.
I'd like to add my thanks to the organizers and the community for putting this together and for attending. It really is an honor to be here, and you know, we all have multiple identities, and I think the understanding each other and understanding each other as people is very important. I feel quite nervous today because I'm speaking to you not as a professor of economics, but as a student, as a Sikh. And so I'll really look forward to your inputs on something that I hadn't thought about much until Dr. Nirvikar Singh said, well, this would be a good topic for your talk, and my mentor and Dr. Indrajit Kaur said, yes, that would be a good topic, you shouldn't, because I said, oh, that's too difficult, and but she said, no, you have to try the difficult things, and actually my son Keshav Singh, who's a philosophy student, also guided me on this, so I feel very happy to have been part of, in some sense, a community effort to try to explore this topic. And what does economics have to do with the Guru Granth Sahib? It is a hard act to follow Nikki and Indrajit, because they're talking about sublime, beautiful things, poetry and music, and I'm talking about the mundane business of everyday life. But in a sense, that's also what Sikhi is about. It's about how to be the lotus on the water, how to live this life, but still transcend it in some sense, and live a good life. I do have a few copies of my paper. I'm going to skip over most of it given the time constraints, but I'll say a little bit about the motivation, and what I really want to do is then to go to highlighting the true subject of today's conference, which is the spiritual guidance that we can get from the Guru Granth Sahib. So economics, as you know, is the study of the business of everyday life. It's about markets. Sometimes economics gets thought of very narrowly, well, it's just about markets and how markets can work well, and that's all we need to focus on. But actually, economics has deeper roots. It is a broader discipline. I think good economists recognize the limits of markets. Not everything can be provided in the marketplace through competition. That's, for example, why we do have governments to provide what economists call public goods, like law and order and public parks and so on. So that's I think that's I think a better definition of economics that includes non-market activities as well. One of the motivations for thinking about this topic, though, is that the market system seems to have failed, right? We've just gone through a very major economic crisis, and at the same time it seems like governments are also limited in their capacity to rectify or rescue the situation. So I think there's, whether you look at the United States or Europe or Asia, there is really this feeling that somehow we need to rethink the economic system. Is there something better than capitalism as practiced? And it's not an obvious answer, because we've seen the failure of Soviet-style communism 20 years ago. We've seen the troubles that the so-called third way that Europe has in terms of organizing the economy is running into. So it isn't an easy answer, and I'm not going to give you a sort of magic answer. But what I'd like to suggest to you that is that actually there's some very specific and valuable guidance in the Guru Granth Sahib, and it's something that perhaps suggests how economists like myself might refocus the way we think about economic systems and about people interacting within those economic systems. So, the idea of economics as being more than just about markets still hinges on the typical assumption of economists that we have preferences give us utility or satisfaction, and the baseline assumption is that people behave in their own self-interest. And you can have a somewhat broad definition of self-interest, but it's always about self-interest. That might include looking after your family and so on. That's also part of perhaps self-interest, passing on your genes. And but it's really I think there that the limitations of much of thinking about economic systems lie. And perhaps it's inevitable, because an economist typically, our major job is to say, okay, this is the way the world is. Right? But when you look at something like Guru Granth Sahib, what it is telling you is this is the way that the world could be and should be. And that's really the essential point that I want to make, that perhaps by looking at the Guru Granth Sahib for specific guidance, that we can lead better lives in our everyday lives, even when we're not pursuing things that might have aesthetic merits, just going about our daily lives. And this is something that historically, before I turn to the Guru Granth Sahib itself, historically, we're all familiar with our history. The Gurus walked the walk, right? Guru Nanak organized a community, and this community was based on this integration of the spiritual and everyday life. It was a community which involved economic activity, agriculture, trade, and as well as a routine of spiritual guidance and pursuit. So this was all conceived as an integrated activity, that the spiritual and the material or temporal go together. And so it's not something that, Miri Piri is not something that starts with Guru Hargobind. You can trace the conceptual roots of it to the founding of the Sikh community, the Sikh religion. And at the same time, I think history also gives us another lesson, that when the Gurus had to choose, they always put doing the right thing above any kind of material pursuit. So if, just to give you one example, and maybe this is my interpretation, when Ram Rai was kind of co-opted by the Mughal emperor, he was disowned. So the pursuit of some kind of some kind of temporal or material benefit was rejected. The Gurus were always willing to sacrifice everything to preserve the central spiritual message. And I think we all I think understand that. That's how we try to live our lives as Sikhs, and really all I'm doing is just saying what you already know, and perhaps in a slightly different language as an economist. So what I'd like to do now is actually just turn to just a few familiar quotes from the Guru Granth Sahib, and just connect that to what I've said. And you're all familiar, for example, with the idea that the Gurus put truthful living above everything. Sacho ore sabko upar sachacha. Truth is higher than everything, but higher still is truthful living. The Gurus also stress equality, egalitarianism. Jati daikya, had sach parkya. What good is social class and status? Truthfulness is measured within. And again, garab vas mein kul nahi jati, brahm bindu te sab utpati. In the dwelling of the womb, there is no ancestry or social status. All have originated from the seed of God. So this is I think very important, because again, perhaps one of the things that sometimes gets distorted by economists or people thinking about economics is that we don't pay enough attention to equity, to equality, and it's maybe true of some of the profession, but it's certainly not true of all of the profession. There's a very strong tradition in economics of paying attention to equity and egalitarianism, as well as efficiency, using resources effectively. The Gurus also have then specific, more specific guidance about how do you live that life, how do you respect others. These are examples of talking about work, charity, and humility. Je lore changa apna kar tunno neech sadaiye. Is pekhe thavo giro phala jibo ko versaye. If you yearn for goodness, then perform good deeds and feel humble. Instead of wearing these beggar's robes, it is better to be a householder and give to others. Okay, so these are a couple of quotes that really say, well, you should earn your living, not live on others' charity, but at the same time, you have to share. And that goes back to the idea of egalitarianism. And here's another more explicit one. Kal khaye kich hatho de nanak ra pachane se. One who works for what he eats and gives some of what he has, oh Nanak, he knows the path. And again, we have these, often we talk about, Naam Japo, Kirat Karo Ban Chako, and that's our kind of summary, but obviously it's based on the Bani. The Gurus have said these things very explicitly. Here's a couple of quotes talking about the shared humanity. Kima gahi brat sal santok. Kima gahi brat sil santok. Na ko doodh nahi berai. Gal mil chale eke pai. So the first quote is, to practice forgiveness is the true fast, good conduct and contentment. And then, I have no enemies, no adversaries. I walk arm in arm like brothers with all. Then, seva karat hoye nekami tisko hot parapat swami. One who performs selfless service without thought of reward shall attain his Lord and Master. Now, how do we put these into practice? That's still an issue. And what is interesting, again, if you look at history, the Gurus supported and encouraged participation in economic activity. Right? You can't just be a householder you also have to work for a living, you have to participate in the economy. The gurus have lots of metaphors about, they talk about, they talk about wealth and capital and trade and banking. And what's very interesting is that there are two kinds of references to these economic activities. One actually implicitly recognizes that these are natural and acceptable activities, because the divine is, the metaphor for the divine is as the true merchant or the true banker, and Sikhs are reminded to connect with the divine through this metaphor of trade. But there's also another kind of reference where the reference is to actual trade that human beings engage in, worldly trade. But the point is to state its limits, as here's an example. Sabko banaj kareva para, bin nave sab tota sansara. Everyone deals and trades, but without the naam, all the world loses. There's also specific amplifications of this idea that even when you engage in economic activity, your prime directive should be to behave in an ethical manner. Right? So self-interest has to be limited by your moral principles, by your ethical principles, and how do you develop those ethics? That's what I'm going to finally come to. But here's an illustration of how the Guru talks about trust. Manmukhano ko na visai chuk gaya vesas. No one places any reliance in the self-will. Trust in them is lost. And here's lobi ka vesa na kije, je ka par vasaye. Ant kal tithe tu hai, jithe hath na paye. Do not trust, sorry, I should have put it in a bigger font. Do not trust greedy people if you can avoid doing so. At the very last moment, they will deceive you there where no one else will be able to lend a helping hand. So the idea is that greed basically undermines trust. And this is actually something where there's been quite a bit of recent study in economics about the importance of trust. I could give you some academic references, but the idea is that, again, so I think economists are trying to get to grips with this notion that it's not all about self-interest. It's not all, everything is not solved by just leaving everything up to the market. But it's not necessarily solved by leaving everything up to the government. There's some underlying basis in terms of our morality that has to guide how we behave. Let's. How am I doing with time? 5 minutes? Okay. So so a couple more points and then I'll end. The gurus also have some very interesting things to say about governance. For example, Tharika mein ekas ki sil sahab vad purak swami. He alone is my support. He is my only protection. My great Lord and Master is over and above the heads of kings. So this has a dual implication. One is, again, stressing equality, that kings are not somehow divine or above the rest of humanity. And it also is placing a responsibility on the ruler. And there's some very trenchant criticism of unjust rulers. Harna baja te sikdana enna padya nao phandi lagi jat Pahayan, Age Nahi Thao. Deer, falcons, and government officials are known to be trained and clever. When the trap is set, they trap their own kind. Hereafter, they find no place of rest. There's Raje si mukaddam kutte jagayan baithe sutte chakar neda payan kao rat pit kutiye chat jao. So this is very, very, very trenchant criticism. The kings are tigers and the officials are dogs. They go out and awaken the sleeping people to harass them. The public servants inflict wounds with their nails. The dogs lick up the blood that is spilled. So there's basically a very strong condemnation of unjust governance as well. So so notice that there's this very clear message. We have to be in this world, we have to live well, we have to live morally and ethically in this world, but ultimately, where does that guidance come from? It comes from the divine, and that's what the message is. So just relating it back to what I was saying earlier about economics, I think that's where perhaps economics as a discipline still has some way to go, and I think ultimately some of the progress, as in any other discipline, comes from being interdisciplinary, from learning from from philosophy, from sociology, from other disciplines, and it's very interesting. You see a lot of these ideas in the management literature. I'm sure Jagjot is very familiar with this. The idea of self-improvement, for example, in management, of course, it comes from a completely different motivation. It's not about religion and so on, but the idea is that we all share humanity, right? But we're not limited by that humanity. We're not necessarily stuck where we are. That by studying the Bani, by meditating on the Naam, that we can actually transform ourselves. And it's that transformation that actually, this idea that there's an idea in several disciplines of extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic is where I do something because I'm going to get rewarded from outside. Somebody's going to give me money or praise or whatever. But intrinsic motivation comes from, we want to do something because it's the right thing to do, or because it's something that will create a benefit. And of course, you can have preferences, you can get satisfaction from doing wrong things, right? So I think that's where economics is I think, still coming to grips with this, that preferences are not morally neutral, and that we as human beings can change our preferences, that we can become better people. And that's really there's a very specific message in Gurbani about how to achieve that personal transformation. And what is wonderful about it is that that method of achieving personal transformation, it's the best way possible, because what we're told is you don't have to run away from the world. Just be in this world, participate in it, be part of the community, do good, all the things that are part of being a human being and natural for us. These, if we follow spiritual guidance, will take us along the right path. Thank you. Do we have any concrete knowledge as to how economies were organized by the gurus in the cities they founded? Kartarpur, Amritsar, Anandpur, etc., by Misaldars in the 1700s, and during Sikh Raj under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. I don't think we have a whole lot of detailed information. I'll just tell you what I think based on the historical information that we have. I think the Sikh communities were organized as typical communities would have been at that time. the main occupation was agriculture, and then the main supporting occupation of that would be, different kinds of trade. So you see references in Gurbani and in historical accounts at that time about, trading in clothes, horses, and so on. There's, I think, a recognition, though, that, again, if you read some of the references in Gurbani, that there's a clear sense that just accumulating wealth for its own sake is meaningless, and in fact can lead to corruption. The gurus also, by the time of Guru Arjan, had some remission of taxes from the Mughal emperor, and so basically they relied on voluntary donations, and they used those voluntary donations then to provide public goods, like the langar is really one of the oldest Sikh institutions, and you can see that as a very basic institution, and it's one can trace some of the the sort of pros and cons of some of these issues, of course, to modern political and economic debates. Beyond that, you can see that there's always the pressure of the rest of the world, and I think the second part of the question asked about under Maharaja Ranjit Singh. I think that's a very different kind of economy. That's much more like an empire, and it relies on tribute from satellite regions and so on. So I think the empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh is very different from the community of Amritsar 200 years before that. The focus should be on making money, delving into our professions, etc. How much on pure spirituality? I'm not sure that there's a unique question, how much is enough? I mean, that's, probably every Silicon Valley entrepreneur thinks, well, I've made my first million, should I go after 10 million? Do I want to be, the next Google, or am I happy, with this moderately successful startup? I think what Gurbani says is that ultimately it's divine grace, and your material success, in some sense, beyond the point, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, you should, what you want to do is to work hard and be ethical in everything you do, live a good life, and that divine grace will take care of you. So, and bad things do happen to good people, and we all face bad luck, good luck. I think one of the things that Sikhi again emphasizes is the spirit of Chardi, Kalaa, that we are all part of this wonderful universe, and that we have to keep that positive spirit. I'm sure we have several entrepreneurs in this audience who will. You can ask them in the break which is coming up. What is the right amount of money? Last question, when it comes to sharing the earnings, how do you decide where to share, where to give? Everyone seems needy. With economics, I will always be looking at the most profit where I can earn. Again, I guess the answer from Sikhi might be that true profit doesn't just come in monetary terms. There's actually an interesting, I don't have the exact reference, but I remember reading it in this book by Nirvikar Singh, The Sikh Moral Tradition, and he points out that this is not specifically in Gurbani, but it's the interpretation by Sikh scholars, that there's not an explicit prohibition against usury, against lending money at interest, but there's a distinction made. If you're lending money to somebody else who's going to invest it at a profit, it's all right to charge them interest. In some sense, you're supporting their mercantile activity. But if you're lending money to somebody who's in need, right, then it would be ethically wrong, morally wrong to charge interest. So it's a very, I think, a very nice nuanced position. And so, you know, in the second case, you could say, well, I'm not making a profit, I'm not getting interest, but you are. I mean, that's what Gurbani says. The true merchant, the true banker, is the divine, and the ultimate merit, the ultimate profit, is to come closer to the divine. So I think, you know, ultimately, again, I guess you could also, you know, you could take this further. You could say, well, if I give money to charity, I give lots of money to charity, and I become very proud and egotistical about that, that itself is then not something that is necessarily desirable. So it's I don't think I can give you a unique answer, but maybe some ideas about how to approach that topic. One more, okay. Okay, so this is from a very distinguished scholar, Professor Ajay Singh. How much is enough? Isn't it a matter of distinguishing your needs from your wants? This is, I mean, conceptually I entirely agree with you, and this is where I think economics sometimes, you know, has this problem of, well, all wants are equally good in terms of, you know, just, okay, you vote with your dollars in the marketplace, and we know that that doesn't lead to necessarily the best possible, you know, social system. There's actually a book by Harvard professor Michael Sandel who talks about how trying to put everything into a market framework kind of undermines our sort of, you know, our beings, our ability to function as you know, good human beings. But again, you know, what is the definition of need? Again, I think it, you know, I don't think there's a really perfect answer. You know, somebody may have different needs than I have, you know, and how do we decide? I think certainly if we live in a world where some people are starving, that's an unjust world. But you know, do we need 2 cars? That's instead of 1 car, or you know, those kind of things. Ultimately, I think there's going to be a lot of context dependence, and I'm not sure that there's an absolute bright line. But I think that, you know, the main guiding principle has to be that at some point enough is enough, right? We don't have to constantly try to accumulate material wealth. I hope that sort of answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nirvikar. I'm struck just looking at the 3, it has been a pleasure introducing these 3 speakers. I have a new definition of success. It's Gurbani, as Professor Nirvikar Singh taught, Shabad Kirtan, as Professor Nirvikar taught, and it's Kirtkar, as Professor Nirvikar. Indeed fortunate to have such great speakers. Moving on, just quick logistics. We are going to have a 10-minute break.